Hey everybody, hope this video will help you focus your attention in certain areas on the test. This is our top 10 for test 2 video. And actually, let me give you a warning before we proceed. Do not focus just on these topics. I can see some of you saying, I'm just going to spend my time there. And in fact, that's not going to be a good idea. There will be other topics covered on the test, but these are the major ones, the ones that you should be especially aware of. So do focus some attention here. And in fact, we're not even going to do a top 10. We're going to do an extravagant 11. I really just couldn't narrow it down to 10 topics. So we're doing a top 11 topics. And as we do this, let me just go through and just give you a 30-second to minute blurb on each of them. This is not to reteach this material. This is to kind of remind you of the important focus areas. So as we start, if you want to do a drum roll yourself, our top 11, extravagant 11, synovial joint anatomy. You should be quite familiar with how a synovial joint is put together. What are the components? Remember the capsule and the synovial membrane and the synovial fluid and the ligaments and the organization into a capsule. So you should go back and look definitely at synovial joint anatomy. Number 10, microscopic structure of bone. Recall that we looked closely at Haversian systems, the osteon of compact bone. So make sure you understand, first off, differences between compact bone and spongy bone, but then remember that trabeculae, for example, are characteristic of which type? Of spongy bone. Remember that spongy bone has a different name. Compact bone has a different name. If you see cancellous bone, you should know which one that is. If you see a term like Haversian canal, you know what that's associated with. So make sure you go back and look at the osteons of compact bone, look at the trabeculae of spongy bone. Make sure you're very familiar with microscopic bone structure. Number 9, fractures and bone repair. Obviously, this is a big one because this includes not only how fractures occur and how they're classified, but also how bone repairs. So you should know that fractures are classified in different ways. We discussed open and closed. We discussed kinds of fractures like the direction of the fraction angle. We talked about different kinds of fractures like a Colles fracture, which is a fracture of the distal wrist. So make sure that you go back and look at the fracture section in particular, and then also how bone repairs once it is fractured. The process of forming the hematoma and then the fibrocartilaginous callus, etc. So that's a big area. Number 8, long bone anatomy. The long bone anatomy is really important because it helps us understand how long bones work. Work as in how they grow, work as in how they store material. So you should know diaphysis and epiphysis and metaphysis and endosteum and periosteum. Be very clear on where you find the epiphyseal growth plates. Be very clear on where you find spongy bone versus compact bone. So that's an important area. Along with that, again, then number 7, bone growth. Bone grows in 2 different ways, interstitial growth and appositional growth. So you should be able to explain in some detail how the bones get longer. And that's, you have to probably explain what happens at a growth plate. And don't just say bones get longer there. What kind of cartilage is there? What kind of cell divisions are occurring to produce that kind of extended growth? Why do we stop growing in height? And then on the other side, how do our bones get larger? How do the bones get wider? And that's going to be, of course, the appositional growth. So you should know that. And I'll stop here and say, why did I put these in order from 11 to 1? These are the areas that I think are probably the most important, obviously number 1 and number 2, but even as you go through this list, you can see these are all pretty important topics. Number 6, anatomy reflects physiology. That theme was not just something cute we talked about in the first module. This is going to be something that goes all the way through, and this unit actually is an especially good one for talking about that. Look at the anatomy of bones. How come some bones are long, some bones are short, some bones are flat? Why? How does the anatomy relate to the physiology? For example, if you have the flat bones of the skull, what's their job? Well, they're for protection. By being a flat bone, it helps form part of the cranium, which actually helps protect the brain. If you had long bones making up the skull, first off, you look a little weird, but secondly, it wouldn't do quite the same thing. So think about the anatomy and the physiology for bones, but also really importantly, think about it for joints. We spent some time on one of the videos discussing the differences in joints and the trade-off between structure and mobility, or structure and range of motion. You can have a very, very strong joint like a skull suture. It's a synarthrotic, not moving joint. It can be strong, but not move. Or you can have a synovial joint, which is not going to be as strong, but allows for movement. So you should be prepared to talk about the connection between anatomy and physiology in this unit as well. Number 5. Functions of the integumentary system. Don't forget about the system, even though it was a ways back. And again, try to get away from the idea that the skin just protects. How does the skin protect? It protects against microbes. It does. It also protects against water loss. It also is going to be involved in thermoregulation. It's also going to be involved in helping us synthesize vitamin D, etc. There are several functions in the integumentary system. Do not gloss over these. Go back and look at them. Number 4, homeostatic disorders of bone. This goes back, I think it's video 8.1, where we're looking at the issues related to osteomalacia and Paget's disease and osteomyelitis and osteoporosis. These are all important diseases. And again, don't just memorize the disease. Why does that disease occur? What is the pathology? What is the concern with that particular disorder? For example, with osteomalacia, that's soft bones. Okay, why are bones soft? That takes us back then to what makes bones hard in a normal bone. So please go back and make sure you're familiar with not only the disorder, but why the disorder occurs. Number 3, arthritis. This is, I guess, our last video, 9.1, and there's several types of arthritis. You should be very familiar with these types. You should be able to discuss differences between osteoarthritis, for example, and rheumatoid arthritis. Or if you could talk about one of them being more related to a metabolic disorder, that's gout. If you're talking about one being more related to an autoimmune disorder, that's RA. So you should be quite familiar with arthritis and the types and their causes. Number 2, skin cancer. We had a case study on skin cancer. We didn't really finish it in class. I advised you to finish it because, and I'll just tell you right now, that case study will probably appear in some way, in some form on this test. So go back and look at the case study. It actually takes you through a nice conversation of the cause and effect. UV radiation causes skin cancer. How? You need to understand the connection between UV radiation and damaging cells, the mitotic cells of the skin. So definitely go back and look at skin cancer and know its mechanisms. And number 1, to drum roll, the number 1 area when I look back at this that really connects several areas, and it gets into one. And if you had to pick right now and you had to guess which was number 1, you probably wouldn't necessarily pick this one, but this is the one that I think really deserves some attention, and that's calcium metabolism. This goes back to a conversation we had in class about yes, calcium is really important to make bone strong. It's part of the hydroxyapatite. Calcium and phosphate make up the mineral portion of bone. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, we really need it. And if we don't have it, we have problems. True. But also understand that calcium metabolism is more than just about bone. It's about it's about the level of calcium in the bloodstream. So the body is very homeostatically sensitive to making sure we have enough calcium in the bloodstream. If we had too much calcium in the bloodstream, for example, we become non-responsive and can even die. If we have too little, our muscles become hypersensitive and hyperactive. Calcium is going to be involved in the nervous system and muscles, and several other homeostatic mechanisms depend on the right level of blood calcium. We get kind of tunnel visioned in thinking about calcium in terms of bone and must have calcium, must have it for bone. But remember that bone is just a bank for calcium, and we are going to be pulling calcium and putting it back. How do we put it in? How do we put calcium there? How do we pull it out? I'll take you back just 10 seconds worth of this. Osteoclast and osteoblast. Recall how they do what they do, and recall that PTH and calcitonin are the hormonal regulators of osteoclast and osteoblast. So do go back and look at that. And finally, I have one more number for you, and that's 5.1. That's the video that actually we made for the first test, which gave you some review tips and strategies, and I intentionally made sure that video could be used for this test and the next test and the next test. So do go back, and if you want some extra tips, maybe after you've had a test now and you have some ideas on what you would like to improve on, and maybe there's some hints and tips and guidance in video 5.1 if you want to go back and look at that. Okay, that's the extravagant 11 video for this test review. Again, please don't just focus on these topics, and as you can tell, some of them overlap and some of them are broad, but these are the ones, if I had to come up with the top 11, were the ones that I'll be thinking about as I'm making up your test. Thank you very much.